Hello, guys. I'm so happy to have you for this episode of the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. Today, we get to talk to Carla Hayden, Enneagram 8, about how to recharge with joy. I am so glad because we all have, at this time of summer, this part of us that is ready for renewal. Maybe you've been on vacation. Maybe you've had a kids home every week and you're just kind of wondering what to do next. And of course, you're still hopefully enjoying your work rhythms, your home rhythms, and your spiritual rhythms as well. But what can happen, just like with our bodies when we need to work on that cholesterol, or our minds when we're feeling overloaded, so can our spirits to need a complete refreshment. And so today, Carla reminds us of doing just that, not just for our life, but for our business, for our families, and really for the whole system, right? Because we know bodies, minds, hearts, even our spiritual life, it's all wrapped up together in this biopsychosocial spiritual us, ourself. So, what I love most about Carla today is that she gives us very specific ways to recharge. And you're going to hear me challenge her a little bit to say, hey, you're an 8. I know you can be challenged. Like, what if we can't do this or that? And she has provided such wonderful rhythms for wherever you're at in life to truly soak up a time of reseasoning for yourself, a space of just allowing for new dreams to unfold, for old dreams to shift if needed, and for you to have some space to really uncover what's next. And that is just so mature. I love how when you see her bio in our show notes, she really talks about how this rhythm she's discovered has helped her overall as well. She's an amazing clarity coach for others. That's how I met her, was through Amy Wick's wonderful leadership seminar. She's also her own podcast host. She has a micro podcasting space over at Swellcast. You can look her up at Coffee with Carla. And overall, I've seen her name in books. We've shared spaces with different platform leaders, and she's just so real in terms of how far she's come using these rhythms. So I love when a leader can say, I am a healthy 8, or whatever type you are, because I am doing the practices too. And that's exactly where she meets us today, is to give you the clarity that she has offered to me and all the other leaders that she knows. And maybe even she could be a person that you end up working with for your own business or team, because Carla does that as well, as she'll talk about. So make sure you check out the show notes with everything she offers. Make sure you follow her at Instagram and all of her social media outlets. But most of all, if I've lost you at all, come back to me now so that you can truly be refreshed by this conversation with Carla and her ways that she's going to strategically give you to find that space for you, for God, for your family to be recharged, your marriage. So many different spaces that will benefit when you are allowing yourself some space and margin. So very happy to have her. And I am right there with you guys. I have been on actual in-person book tour. So I was leaning in all the way and using some of these practices even last night. So, okay, let's talk to Carla. Carla, thank you so much for joining the Enneagram and Marriage Pod. We're so happy to have you.
Krista, it is my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this really ever since you and I met, when we met through our mutual friend, Amy Wicks. Amy is such a connector, and that was such a fun gathering for us to meet virtually in that space. And I knew immediately, I'm like, we have a connection. And so when you reached out after kind of another mutual friend, Jody Grubbs, and that connection, I was like, oh, this is going to be a great conversation.
Right. And then we found out Jordan Rayner's your friend. We just had him on
Yes.
the pod.
Yes, love Jordan. I was actually a guest on his podcast a couple of years ago, and so he's so energetic. I mean, I was listening to it and laughing the whole time, just knowing him in real life, and then hearing him. It's like he is everything. You know, what you see is what you get with Jordan. So the energy, the passion, everything, all of his threeness it exudes when you meet them in real life. So
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And you have beautiful energy too. Tell
Oh,
us about
thank
your
you.
Enneagram journey, your type. Somebody here might already be like, oh, I can tell her type. You don't need to tell me, but we still want to hear it.
Yeah, well, I can't remember exactly how I came across the Enneagram. I don't know if it was through social media or just someone had recommended it to me. But a fun fact about me is that I am a lover of all kinds of assessments. I love them. I love personality assessments. I love productivity assessments. I think what I love about them is that they give language to something that's already a knowing or a stirring within me. So I don't necessarily look at them as being tell me who I am. I more look at them as tools to help describe maybe what I haven't been able to put into words before. And it's a fun thing to be able to take them and kind of confirm and affirm maybe things that have already been a part of my life, but also things that are emerging, and they give me confidence and courage to step into those things. So when I was introduced to the Enneagram back in, I want to say it was 2017. So a little while ago. But I just remember taking, I think, a free test, and the results came back that I was an Enneagram 8. So maybe not a surprise to some people. But when I read the description of what an Enneagram 8 was, I was like, yep, that's me. And there's just never been a doubt about it since then. I have really learned to embrace being an 8. I love being an 8. But what I have been pleasantly surprised by is how many people I meet that love that I am an 8. Sometimes 8s get a bad rap,
Yes.
especially when you're talking about those that are not in the healthy space. And so whenever somebody says, "Oh, you're an 8," I almost brace myself internally for a bad experience they might have had with an 8. But more times than not, what I get is, oh, I love 8s. I love 8s, especially ones. Ones love 8s, I
Yeah,
think,
me
because
too.
ones love a lot of direction and clarity, and 8s just come with it naturally. So yeah, I love that. And it's really knowing what my type is has really helped me to value what I can bring to a room or a table or a conversation. Because before
Mm.
I was acquainted with the Enneagram or what the core fears and motivators and gifts of the 8 were, I think I really battled with feeling like I was being prideful for wanting to lead, or I'd be afraid that I would appear bossy if I stepped up and took charge. And these are just kind of natural inclinations for me.
Yeah.
Um, but knowing that I am a healthy 8 and that this is how God has wired me and God has made me to step into those types of places, it's really liberated me to lead with
Mm.
just a confidence. And I think I've also come to understand that most others in the room, especially if they're not an 8, they're looking and hoping for somebody to lead, to step
Yeah.
up, to give direction, so that they have the freedom to operate in their gifts and make meaningful contributions. And so, yeah, I have loved it. I personally love being an 8. I'm proud to be a healthy 8, and I'm always looking for continued ways to grow in my type, as well as surprisingly opening myself up to other people to tell me where I have blind spots. Because the word intense has been used not, less than a dozen times to describe me. And so it is important for me to have very trusted people around me that can tell me, like, you might want to dial it down a little, or, you intimidate people when you do that. And so, that's just really helped me to find balance with walking in the ways that God has designed me, but also being sensitive to the way that that might feel to another person.
Yes, that's so well said. And you can see you've done so much work around it because you're open to hearing feedback, but you're also aware this is my gift. It just has a
Yeah.
flip side caution. And so it isn't against me when somebody says, hey, if I'm going to handle you, I'm going to need to take it in doses. And you're like, okay, ouch. But at the same time, thank you for telling me how I'm coming across because
Yeah.
I think you want honesty more than anything as an 8. Otherwise, there's a sense of rejection wound of, what happened? I need some
Yes.
clarity. And one of your handles that I love is Clarity Carla, right?
It is. Yes,
Love
it
that.
is.
I'm like, that's what you brought me in a 5-minute conversation. So, you guys, she is here to bring us clarity today. And also, how I, of course, we really, really connected in the sense that I know that you have found your rest rhythms because even
Mhm.
people we know who are eights have to have a rest rhythm as well. So, tell us about that part of being an eight. How did you learn to pace? How did you learn to get some rest? And just even these feelings of like, did it show up as anxiety for you? Like, what made you realize I am going to need to figure this out? Because yes, I have a lot of energy, but it does run out.
Yeah. I mean, not surprising to those who are eights or are familiar with the eight energy, we have a very high capacity. We are high capacity workers, high capacity for, our threshold for, I think, pain and enduring things is maybe higher than some of the other types. And
Yeah.
so I think the downside to that is that we don't sometimes hear or know that internal door stopper, that internal speed bump. It almost doesn't exist sometimes. And I think that that varies in your level of health.
Yeah.
But for me, what that looked like is that a number of years ago, I actually got sick with what I thought was just the common cold.
Yeah.
But what the clue for me was that it was taking me months to recover from something so simple.
Yeah.
And I just felt exhausted all the time. And it was more than just me needing more sleep. I felt tired inside of my body, inside of my soul.
Wow.
And I'm somebody who has always been relatively healthy. I haven't, praise God, I haven't had any kind of lingering health issues or chronic health issues. And so that was a clue for me. That was a clue of like, maybe my current lifestyle or the way that I'm going about approaching life isn't the healthiest. And so when I really felt like, something just isn't right here, I sought the care and advice of a number of different professionals. I saw medical doctors. I went to holistic and osteopathic practitioners. I have a massage therapist. I talked to my biblical counselor. And at the end of that, the end result of all of those conversations and appointments was that I was in adrenal fatigue and my body just wasn't keeping up with my maxed out life. I know this is the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. I was married. I am a single mom of 3 adult kids, and I have an elderly mother who I'm getting ready to be the primary caregiver for. So, like a lot of your listeners, I'm sure I'm in what's called the sandwich generation. I'm working a full-time job. I've got kids on the one side, and I've got an elderly parent on the other side. So when you put all of that together with my natural personality, I was probably way past the point of resting and me, taking that time for myself. And so God in his mercy, I think, allowed that sickness to, be that blinking red light of like, you've got to slow down, kid. And so what happened was in one of my therapy sessions with my counselor, he had asked me when the last time was that I had taken a vacation where I did nothing, where I just relaxed and rested. And that was such a foreign concept to me because for me, vacation equaled trip. It meant packing my schedule and doing and seeing and eating and documenting all the things to get the most bang for my buck. And so the concept of taking a vacation where I did nothing just didn't even exist. It didn't exist in my experience. It didn't exist in my vocabulary. But I did remember one time where my kids and I had taken a spring break trip to Gulf Shores, Alabama. I'm based in Indianapolis, so it's not close. It's about a 13-hour drive. But we intentionally went there for my youngest son's spring break from high school. And so we drove, we rented a condo, we bought a bunch of groceries and frozen pizzas, and we just relaxed. And there was no agenda.
I
There
love
was no tourist plans. We
Yeah.
slept, we went to the beach, we watched movies, we had coffee on the balcony overlooking the ocean. We had chats with one another. I mean, it was the dream. But the reality is that was a huge investment for me, especially being in a single income household. I had to take time off work and I had to spend quite a bit of money to make that week happen. So quite frankly, although it was great, it just
Yeah.
wasn't a sustainable practice for me. It wasn't something
Right.
I could
Yeah.
just make as like a weekend trip or a day trip. It was 13 hours away.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Thanks for making that like awareness so that everyone's like, oh,
yeah,
she just takes the vacation. I'm shutting this off. You're like, no, no, no.
no, no,
We're fine
no.
with
It
it.
was like, yeah, and there was a lot of planning and saving and all the things. And so in that moment, in that conversation with my counselor, when I had recounted, like, I think that was the only one and only vacation I've ever taken where I actually rested and did nothing. I remembered that I had saved like an account on my Instagram for a cute little Airbnb that was near my house. It was about 90 minutes away. And I had bookmarked that little Airbnb for someday. And I know we all have that, I'm going to do that someday. And the someday had arrived for me. And so I ended up, after that appointment, I ended up booking 3 days and 2 nights at a little place called the Tiny Shed. It's so cute. It really was just like a shed, but they had converted it into like a little Airbnb. And I made plans at that point to take a mini personal retreat. And so that's really what led to that first retreat and that beginning of taking rhythms of rest. Was it actually was, a gigantic pit stop that God used to pull me over and reevaluate kind of my approach.
Yeah, but you're being really intentional to share with us that it was a journey, even to notice and then to be able to create the space. Because
Yeah.
you're really bursting that illusion that, like, oh, you found out your treatment plan, it's immediately going to be in place. And you're like, I had to work for that too
Yeah.
on fumes, but you got there a couple times to these places where you could get a little bit of respite. And I love that you're really allowing us to hear it was a journey. And then as you did this, did you come up with a rhythm for regularity that you could try at home too? And kind of notice, okay, this is what it took, and I can bring this home with me?
Yeah. And, talking about kind of, bursting that illusion that it was an overnight thing, to your point, it was a journey to get to the point of realizing how way past rest I had gone. But it was also a journey once I took that first retreat. So
Yeah.
booking the Airbnb and getting there that was the easy part. Once I got there, that was its own experience that I had to work through. And I don't know how much you or your listeners can relate, but it is really hard to go from running at Mach speed to a complete and total stop. Like it just, it sounds, I can post about it on Instagram. It looks really dreamy, but the internal wrestling that was going on is anything but postable. I mean, nobody wants to see that. And yet I think we do want to see it. I think we
Yes,
do want
we
to
want
know.
to see those desperate women or
Yeah.
men struggling.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the very unfiltered version of it is that, I took this retreat, and the funny thing about it is you just aren't going to break those habits overnight. And so even though I had intentionally taken that time to relax and rest, I woke up on my first morning at that little tiny shed on this retreat, and I was like, okay, let's get a jump on the day. I mean, to myself, I'm there by myself, but
Right.
that mentality was still there because my usual MO when I'm visiting a new place is there's so much to do, there's so much to see. Let's go to a cute coffee shop, let's check out a great restaurant. And that was not the intention of the retreat. The intention of the retreat was just to have that respite like you talked about. And so that morning when I woke up and felt that natural fleshly inclination to get a jump on the day, I actually took a moment, I paused, I listened to the Lord, I listened to my body, and I determined what I needed in that moment was more sleep and more rest. And so I crawled back into bed and I
Wow.
slept for another couple of hours. And that is, I mean, I'll tell you,
I
that's a
know that's
luxury.
not easy for any
Yeah.
one of us who's in the 3-7-8 space. Girl, that's
Yeah.
hard.
It's hard, but
Yeah.
I slept. I mean, I think I woke up that morning probably maybe about 6:30, and then I went back to
Yeah.
sleep. So then I woke up again maybe about 8:30. And when I finally got out of bed, they have a cute little coffee maker in there. So I made myself some coffee and I went outside, got some fresh air. But the rest of that day was so interesting because it took me hours. Well, I mean, hours. In preparing for our conversation, I kind of looked back at my journal and my notes because I was like,
Thank you.
remind myself about how that time actually was, because it's been about 5 years since that first one. But I literally wrote in there that it took me hours just to get to the point where I could read and write a few scriptures in my little notebook that I brought. And so what was really eye-opening for me was how much head trash that I had to wade through in order to decompress, how much and how long it took me to get there. Hours. I mean, and I'm somebody who, I do have a daily discipline of being in the word and praying and all of the spiritual disciplines. So this is not like, oh, I've been far from God and I haven't opened the word in years and now it's taking me a long time. No, I was doing
That
that.
is so well said.
Yeah. I mean, I was doing that, but being in that place of relative silence and solitude,
Mhm.
there was so much head trash and so much noise that I had to wade through in order to truly, like, to feel the inside of me, like, relax and just not be. So I had planned to shower. I had planned to go into town to grab some lunch, to go to a coffee shop, to write. I had all these plans for myself. And I'll tell you, none of it happened. I literally did not have the energy to pull myself together and be in public. Like, it's one thing to be in this little tiny shed where nobody's seeing me. Like, that's all well and good, but like, oh, I have to be in public. So I ended up just putting some essential oils in my little diffuser. I turned on my Spotify to an instrumental praise station, and I pulled the covers over my head and I sobbed myself into a slumber. And I was probably asleep for another few hours. And I woke up feeling the way that you would feel when you've had a fever and that fever has broken. Like, I mean, I know we've just met your audience today. I have, but like, you need to know, like, I woke up sweaty. Like, I woke up, I was sweating, but there was just a sense of relief that had come over me. And, I wouldn't be surprised if there was just some angelic ministering going on while I was sleeping, because I hadn't rested like that in years. And I often tell people that first retreat, it was like I was an infant. I slept, I cried, I ate, and on repeat for 3 days.
Oh my,
And that was the first one.
that's beautiful. Oh my gosh, that was the first one. And in
That
that
was the
one,
first one.
you clarified for us that there was some unexpected things that happened, that you had to take care of some head trash. And
Mhm.
recently we talked on our deeper dive podcast about the cognitive biases. And I talked to my membership group about that. And I feel like we hear that for those who share our faith, Philippians 4:8, think on good
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Just like there were so many pieces of negativity biases against yourself, against others, that you had to sort of work through first?
Yeah, I would say more against myself than others. It was more of the things I should be doing, the
Oh,
things, that you should be using this time for this, you should be doing that, you shouldn't be doing this. It was a lot of that. It was a lot of like a mental to-do list just running through my head, all of the things, emails I should be getting caught up on, or, whatever. And it really, God was so faithful to continue to return me to that place of, this is not what this is for. This is actually a time for you to relax and to rest. And, as I mentioned before, as I'm a single mom, I'm a leader in the marketplace. And so a big part of my daily life is leading other people. And so this retreat was a breaking, just like you would break a horse. It's like it was a breaking of me out of the mercy and the kindness of God, to let me know that you might have to be a leader in all of these other spaces, but you get to come away with me and let me lead you for this short period of time. And so what I learned, because you had asked, like, that was the first one, have I continued to do them? And I actually have. So the three things, looking back on that first retreat, I know I walked away with three major takeaways. The first one was, it wasn't long enough. I mean, I told you it was 2 nights and 3 days. But as I mentioned, my life is full, it's fast, and quite frankly, I need a long runway to go from running to relaxing to then eventually resting. It's not something I can just switch off, even though I do this on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I'm in constant drive mode and I need that long runway to kind of get into it. And so only having 2 nights to be there, by the time I got to that place of fully resting, it was time for me to return. And I just didn't get out of it. I knew after that first one, like, oh, I'm going to need at least one extra day, just so that I can not put the pressure on myself to hurry up and get spiritual on day one. It's like,
Right.
I need that time of descent. So that was the first thing that I learned, is that I needed to make it a little bit longer for myself. The second thing was that it couldn't just be a one-time event whenever I needed to take an emergency pit stop. I really needed to incorporate this into my regular maintenance routine. So very much like you would take your car for regular oil changes or tire rotations to prolong the life of your vehicle. We don't only invest in auto maintenance once our engine blows up or our transmission falls out, and yet, I mean, I have to confess, that's how I was living my life. I was living my life in such a way where it's like, I'll stop when I hit the brick wall. And God just had something so much better for me and for those around me. And so, like I said, the first thing was, let's make it a little bit longer. The second thing was, let's make it regular. And I mentioned that I am a leader in the marketplace. And one of the things that I do is I help business owners and I help leaders move from chaos and dysfunction to order and health in their companies. And one of the ways that I do that is that I lead them through a rhythm of quarterly planning meetings. And so if you've ever been kind of in a corporate setting or whatever, you might be familiar with this. They're usually, full day offsite meetings, and you evaluate the health of your people, your processes, your profit, and whether you're on track, for the year.
Different mental health clinic, and it was very exhausting at times to do that, but
Yeah.
very rigorous and important.
Exactly. And when I thought about, this is what I do for companies, to make sure that they're healthy, I thought, well, why don't I just do that for myself? Why don't I do that for my personal life? Why don't I take time away once a quarter and get away with my leadership team, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and take that time to relax and rest and become refreshed and get refocused? And so this has become a quarterly rhythm for me as much as I can. Again, life happens, and sometimes it's not always possible, but that is my goal and my aim, is to do it quarterly as much as possible. And then the third thing that I realized, walking away from that retreat, was what a difficult time I had receiving. I am great at giving. I am wired to serve and to sacrifice, but to be still and to rest. The paradox of that in my life is that takes work for me. It takes work for me to rest. So these retreats really are a sacrifice of my flesh and my humanity, and they're my offering to God. And in return, he comes near and he leads me to those green pastures and those still waters that I so desperately need and want, but I oftentimes can't get there on my own. So yeah, that's what I've been doing for really the past 5 years, is that I take these personal retreats that are about 3 nights, 4 days. Usually I just take like a weekend. So I'll go up maybe on a Thursday night after work. I'll take that Friday off from work. I'll be there, Saturday, and then I'll come back home Sunday afternoon or evening. So I'm not taking a whole lot of time off from work. So again, we talked about it being sustainable. It's 90 minutes from my house, so it's drivable. It's an Airbnb that's affordable, and I'm not having to take a whole lot of time off work. So it's a rhythm that I can sustain. And sometimes the retreats for me are times of deep reflection and repentance. Sometimes they are ideating and planning and writing. Sometimes they're joy and pleasure, and I get to go out and explore those cute coffee shops that I told you that I like. But I think that the big thing for me is I go to the same place so that there's a routine for me, that I don't have to deal with some of the unknowns, because again, as an 8, I don't like the vulnerability and like what's going to blindside me. So I know exactly what I'm getting. So I go to the same place and I pack all the things that I think I'm going to need, but I really leave the agenda up to God. And each retreat has been different. Every single time. I've been doing them for 5 years. They've all been different in their focus, but I will tell you that they all always include sleeping in until my body wakes itself up.
Mm.
It includes taking long walks along the country road outside of the Airbnb and getting fresh air. You know,
Yeah.
my job is so much in front of a screen and under fluorescent lights, and so it's an opportunity to get fresh air and stretch and walk. I'm always spending an extended time in the Word and in prayer and worship, and I'm always taking naps, always, which is not a normal thing for me in my day-to-day life, but that's my kind of blank permission slip of like, you just get to sleep
Mm.
when you feel tired. And it really brings me back into a place of being a child in her father's arms, and just that place of safety, which I know
Mm.
you work with a lot of eights. That's a
Mhm.
hard place to get for us.
Hard, and you're
Yeah.
just really spelling it out so that everyone who can share that 8 space or has a wing or arrow there or a partner there, can hear you say, "This is how it has looked for me." And I also like it for those who may not share that same rhythm that you're saying, "I am attuning this to who I am." And because you work with a
Yes.
lot of corporations and individuals who are business owners, and that's how you and I even met, you also help to curate their story too, so that they can find their rhythm. Am I right?
Yes. 100%. Yeah.
So good. That's so good. What do you feel like it could help people where they're like, okay, I have kids, I have a spouse, like you said,
Hmm.
sandwich generation.
Yeah.
What if the schedule doesn't allow for them to go away quarterly, but they still want to do pieces of this?
Yeah. I would advocate for taking these retreats as solo
Right.
retreats. I know
Yeah.
that there are
Yeah.
religious organizations where you can take group retreats, but that
Yes.
there's a very planned agenda and you're connecting with other people. So this is more for somebody who really wants to take some
Yeah.
intentional time away just to be with the Lord.
I love it.
So the first thing that I would say is it I have found, because I am an extroverted eight, so I have found that although the somewhat silence and solitude that I'm in for those 3 to 4 days is so important for my mental and spiritual and emotional health, too long disconnected for me is also not healthy. I find that I don't feel rested inside. I feel agitated. And so I would just recommend that for somebody who is starting out, maybe just take a day, like an overnight. Maybe it's to a local hotel, or maybe a
Yeah.
friend has a space that you can borrow where they're not going to be for the weekend.
Mm.
But just take some time to get away. And, I would encourage you to have an opportunity to process and connect with another human. So, like I said, for some people, 3 to 4 days, that's very scary and draining to be
Yeah.
disconnected for that long.
Yeah.
So try to connect with somebody maybe midway through. I've got a friend that lives in the area
Oh, that's
who
great.
we will actually meet when I first get up there, and we'll grab dinner together, and we'll chat and things like that. And so she'll be there. And then I have another friend that will check in with me, either text or Voxer, and just say, how's it going? How can I be praying for you? No pressure, no need to respond. And so it just gives me that outlet if I felt like I needed it, if I felt like I was kind of becoming untethered, in that space by myself.
Yeah.
It gives
Right.
me a couple of safe
Oh,
people who I can reach back out to and connect with, and then unplug again and come back into that space.
yeah.
But for someone who has a spouse, that I think it would be great to incorporate time with them upon your return, like build in a dinner or a coffee date to share what the Lord showed you or how you felt, even if what you're sharing is, I hated it.
Mm.
I was
Yeah.
uncomfortable, because I think that that's an invitation to explore even further. Why did you not like it? What was
Oh.
uncomfortable? Those are great starting points. So,
Mm.
but start where you are. Like I said, I'm a single mom. I'm on a, single income household. I've got kids. I've got a mom. I've got all these, other commitments. And so sometimes it's not possible for me to go every quarter. Sometimes I go only twice a year or once a year. But start where you are and just
Mm.
plan for it. That would be the other thing that I would say, is the planning part is as essential as the retreat itself, so that you really can, whether it's 24 hours or 4 days, that you really do feel safe and comfortable and confident unplugging, and that your people and your pets are okay without you for that period of time.
Oh, I
Um,
love that. I love that empowerment to make it work so
mhm.
that people don't feel like actually, I can't do that. I'm not allowed. And
Yeah.
of course, these are short time periods where you're going to have to set some boundaries sometimes to say, hey, I'm hitting adrenal fatigue. I'm exhausted. I need some space to go away and get regulated. That's why you press play on this podcast, is because you wanted some good rhythms of rest. So you're just saying if you can't or don't want to take 3 to 4 days, have a midpoint where you meet somebody, take a shorter route, but
Yeah.
do get some time. What you're really helping people, I think, to hear you say is don't do a bypass because you're busy. Don't do
Yeah.
a bypass because you're codependent on feeling like you're not allowed, because you hit that wall and you know that you needed it, even though you told yourself you didn't, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think, again, the Lord was really faithful to meet me within the limitations of my season. So, again, this isn't this glamorous, I just have unlimited time and money to spend and I can go whenever I want. I have limitations in my life, just like everybody else, but God will be faithful to meet you there.
Thank you for sharing that. And if there's somebody here who owns a business or who really just wants to work with you one to one to help them, what would you say is the best way to connect with you? Are you doing one to one work? Are you doing more group work, business work?
Both, all, yes, everything. So you can connect with me on Instagram. My handle is coffee underscore with underscore Carla. I'm also on LinkedIn as Carla H. Hayden. I have a micro podcast called Swellcast is the platform. I'm just coffee with Carla there. And I use that space to mentor the next generation with a mama's heart and to disciple them with the truth of God's word through
Mm.
permission slips, practical tips, and prayers. So, yeah, if somebody is interested in one to one mentoring or coaching or even a group mentoring session, I definitely have those. And for those who liked or they were intrigued or felt invited to explore more about the quarterly personal retreat, you can actually
Mm.
go to my website, which is coffeewithcarla.com/retreat. I've created a free resource for you to help you plan, prep, and pack for your retreat.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So cool. I love that. That is just beautiful. You're bringing clarity to us. You're giving us refreshment. You're being personal and vulnerable. Thank you so much, Carla. And thank you for sharing the best spaces where people can connect with you too. I'll leave everything in the show notes for that too. But our audience has been so blessed by you today, and more importantly, so refreshed.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor to be here.
Oh, thank you. You guys so much for tuning in. I just loved her quarterly ideas. Also, as soon as we had finished our time together, I had a session an hour later and I mentioned her practice to a client, and they immediately said, I could take this and just really use one day for myself to get clarity, to get rest. And it was such a gift. So allow yourself to take one thing from today and make sure you stay tuned for Wednesday when we go to talk about the bonus secret hidden chapter that we're going to talk about finally at full length on Wednesday. But also just head on over to the show notes and make sure you start following Carla and all of her outlets so you can glean more, just as I did from the first time I met her. I will talk to you guys soon. Bye bye.